Hi everyone, I'm Marianne, the Artsy Crafter. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be playing with some papers. In particular, we're going to be doing an experiment with a couple of different methods of making background papers that you can use in your junk journals. So we won't be using the traditional method of working directly on the papers themselves to create our designs. Instead, we'll be using a sheet of plastic as our canvas. With this method, we'll be applying colours and making designs on the canvas first, and then placing the papers over the top to transfer our designs. The biggest benefit to doing this method is that if you don't like the design that you've created, you can simply wipe it away, and I'll demonstrate that later on. And then you can start over again until you find something, you create something you like, and this way you haven't wasted any paper. So I like that idea, not wasting any paper, so you don't have to be precious about the designs. You can have fun and experiment. So the plastic sheeting that I've used is one of these, this bit here that I cut off, I didn't use. It's one of those disposable plastic tablecloths that you get to use at parties or whatever, to actually cover your good tablecloths so they don't get ruined. So of course you don't need to use a plastic tablecloth like this, but you do need to use something that has a smooth surface, is non-porous, mostly non-porous, and not glossy. The paint will eventually go through the plastic after many uses, so you may want to put something underneath your work surface to protect it. So I've divided this experiment into two separate parts, which means there will be two different videos. For the colours, we'll be using both watercolour paints and then water-soluble chalk pastels. In today's video, we'll be using just the watercolour paints. Of course, if you're wanting to follow along in this method, you can do both, or you can choose to do one or the other. As for the papers, you can use any kind of papers with this method. So I've used mainly art papers, copy paper, rule paper, parchment paper, those kinds of things. As you can see, a sample of them, book page, those kinds of things. So besides the papers, the other supplies you'll need: a spray bottle of water. That's very handy for activating the colors, so that is very important. Optionally, you can have some coffee dye as well, just to add some more color to the pages. Hairdryer or heat gun will also be handy if you're like me and don't have all day to wait around for the papers to dry. So in this fun little experiment that we'll be doing, I'll show you three different methods of how you can create some beautiful and interesting journal papers. And of course, like any good experiment, that's our main goal, isn't it? So the first method is about creating some general background papers just by painting on some colors on the plastic, and put your papers over the top, and you can either rub the backs or use a rolling pin, which I forgot to mention in my supplies list. And then the second method, you'll be using a paintbrush, and I've got 3 paintbrushes here. Ones you can use to do some backgrounds, the others are used to draw some designs on the canvas, which will then be transferred to your papers. Then the third method is where you'll be using some household items with texture, and we'll use them as stencils to create some decorative designs. And once again, we'll be putting the stencils on there, applying the color, and then the paper over the top. And the things I've used are I've just used what I've had in my house, and it's these things. So I've just used some fabrics, a doily, some broderie anglais that makes some interesting designs, and some of this mat, it's that non-stick mat, and these two are actually placemats, and also of course the good old bubble wrap. You just got to be careful that you don't use anything that's precious to you, because the paints or the chalks will stain your fabrics. I've already gone ahead and made the video showing you how these three methods work to make background papers, so that you can watch without interruption. It's easier for me to work without having to try and talk to you at the same time, so that's a benefit for me as well as you. So make sure you do stick around to the end, where I will reveal the results of how these papers turned out using the watercolor paints. So I'll stop talking now and let you sit back and enjoy the following demonstration, and I'll be back with you at the end of the video. First of all, I'm watering my paint, and then I'm spraying the plastic, and then using my paintbrush to just paint on a variety of colors, and then I'll press over my blank sheet and use a rolling pin to roll it out, and I can even turn it over and do the other side at the same time. I'll do this with several sheets of paper, and I'll use some to mop up some of the color and then start over again. There's no great technique in this, you just use the colors you want and get some mottled effects. This time I'll wet the string, and then I'll soak it in some of the coloured paints and then spread it out over the page. I'll get another sheet of paper and apply over the top, and then use my rolling pin to roll it out. And then, as you see, it makes marks on both sheets of paper. On this next sheet, I will spray some coffee dye onto the page, and then I'll dip the string in some black paint and then use it to make some lines down the page. This time I'll do some squiggly lines in a check pattern, and I'll transfer the image on both sides. Here's where I start to get a little bit arty by painting on a tree branch and some green leaves, and then I paint on the word beauty before splattering with some watercolor paints before transferring the image to a sheet of paper. In case you don't notice, but I've painted the word on back to front, so now I have to do the whole thing all over again. Here I'm painting on a very pale background before I paint some flowers and leaves with yellow centers. I absolutely love how this turned out when it dried. All the pages are done now, so I'll go and dry them, and then I'll come back and show you the results. This was kind of a monumental task because there's a lot of pages that I created, and then when I doing these all over again using the chalk pastels, it will be double this amount. So anyway, it was a lot of fun. So the first ones that I created were the background pages. I'll move these aside for you, and I'm trying to show you the pages in the order that I created them, but sometimes I did go back and have a look at the video trying to sort them all through, but I wasn't successful in 100% of the time, but never mind. I've got the majority of them anyway. So these are the ones with, as I said, the backgrounds where I'm just making background pages and using different effects with the watercolors, and sometimes I sprayed coffee dye, and when I use the rolling pin I sometimes got a double-sided page, so that's always a bonus. So I'll just show you, and some of these that I used with the rolling pin, and some I just smoothed out with my hand to transfer the paint to the page. So these are all the copy paper. This one must have been, I can usually tell when it's the rolling pin I used or my hand because it's double-sided, as you can see, and I think they turned out quite nice, the effects. There's another one there. This is a ruled page, and it's a little bit rustic there, and I might have no, I did that on the roller, as I can see. This one here, I love this. It's kind of very watercolor effect there, beautifully blended, and I think I might have smoothed that one out by hand. Here's another one here. This one is the one where I had the yellow and brown, made the yellow and brown grid lines and put the colored patches in between. And of course, when I used the roller to roll it out, they all blended together instead of staying where I had painted them. But I don't mind. It creates that effect, and I'm quite happy with that. I love that effect, and it did transfer some of the color onto the back. So that's and this is a ruled page. That one I think I might have spread out by hand. There's another one, the same, using those basic colors, and I'll leave the colors that I used. You might want to use different colors, but I'll leave the colors that I did use to create these pages, just in case you want to create the same kind of pages. I'll leave a list to the watercolor colors that I did use to make these spreads, and it might be useful to you, it may not, but that's one I did with the rolling pin. Another one here, and I did that one by hand. I like the you can get a lot of depth and texture in these by using, rolling them out. This one I did, I thought I would have done this by rolling pin, but it looks like I did it by hand, but it's hard to tell. And these are the ones that I did where I did those patches of color, and then when I spread it out, of course the paint spread out and made this sort of pattern because it wrinkled in these areas here, so it kind of kept it in those divided little boxes, but it did blend a bit, and I love that texture. And as I said, these are background pages, so and it did on that. So that one I did by hand, remember, and this one I did with the rolling pin, so it gave you a totally different effect using those two methods. And I'll show you some where I went back, and I didn't do it on the video, but I did do it later on, and I had these little pages, so I just created the same background pages I did here, and then I went back and redid it. I reapplied the paints again, and this gives you a lot more depth, so you can create layers of paint and texture, colors and texture on top of each other by just letting each layer dry first and reapplying those colors. in the exact same method, using the plastic as a canvas. That's one there, and this is another one. Yeah, I like that one, and then this one here. So that's those. And then we go on to the mark making with the watercolors, and this one here is one of the ones I did with the string. And this one the string, the first one I made with just with the string that wasn't colored black, I ended up using to create when I was doing the stencil pages. So I can't show you that one because I went ahead and used it on the stencil pages. But this is the one I did when I colored the string or the crochet cotton with the black watercolor paints. And there's just another one I did. I didn't do this one on camera, but I just wanted to show you, what it looked like. And this is the one where I used the string and I made those lines along there. So that's another way you can make ruled lines on your pages. This is the one where I used paintbrush now and just painted the squiggly lines on there. So that turned out that way. And this is one now where we're trying to make, not you, me. I was trying to make a leaf design. And this is one, the first one was not my greatest, so I went ahead and did this one again. And it's not too bad. And I'll show you what I've done with some of these pages that I did a few more, and to improve the look of that. But I don't mind that as a background. As I said, these are backgrounds, so they're not star of the show. And this is that one where I made it and I wrote the word beauty in with the paintbrush, and of course I painted it on the right way, and then when you turn over and you transfer the image, it's back to front. So that was that one there, and that's very subtle, and that's when I splattered with some paint. And then I went and redid it. I had to paint it on back to front, and so I can get it the right way around this time. So that's on some coffee dye paper, and this is what I used under that, as you'll see later on, that the felt placemat. This was what was the base page underneath so to capture the spraying of the paint, or actually the rolling through, actually transferred the watercolor through, which was nice. This is the one where I did the watercolor flowers and I splattered some paint on there. And this one is my favorite. I just love that loose watercolor effect of the flowers. So I don't want to use this because I think it's quite precious to me. And this is another one that I did, and I like the loose watercolor effect it has, and I think that would look quite nice on a page. And this, I'll show you. These are what I did with those ones I showed you before with, if I can find it, these types of things. I went ahead and I used my ink pens. This one here I outlined in black ink, and then I went back over it again with white ink pen and just added some embellishments to those leaves and the flowers. And I put dots on the one edge of the leaves, and then I made some skeleton leaves there at the bottom here and the stems, and then I splattered it with colored paints and gold paint. You can see that there. And this one here did the same thing, except this time I did it with, after I did the black ink, I did it in the gold over it, and then the white ink, I did those dots on the leaves again, and I did some more skeleton leaves there. And then I used a big paintbrush and I just painted in a watercolor background. There's one I didn't do on camera, but it's just to give you an idea of what you can do. They don't have to look like anything, but when you do outline them, this is the effects you can get. And then this is the one where I did those, what did I do? Pink dots, I think, pink and black. And I did crisscross of black ink, and I think I did dots in the pink, because these images will never be precise unless you, do spend a lot more time creating them, but that's not the purpose of the exercise. It's just to make some backgrounds. So you can go ahead and you can stamp over the top. You can put embellishments over the top and do, you know, tear them up and just use parts of the images and whatnot. So that's the second part of that same design. And this is the one where I had those splotches and a line of stripes down the bottom there, and that's what it ended up being like. This is the one where I attempted to, I had that lace at the background, this one here, and I tried to draw some of the little flowers and that were there with the lines at the back, and that's how that turned out. It's quite like a what do you call it, a crackle effect on there. It's quite nice. And here's another one where I did one and I painted the leaves, and I did it, and then I did one side with the roller, and I think I did the other side with my hands, smoothed it out. So there's the difference in the images. Here's another one where I tried to make that brick pattern. Didn't work out too well. Couldn't make up my mind how I wanted to create the bricks. Here's where I did those little flower things, and they weren't so great. So when this dried and I was doing this one, I like this one with these kind of skeleton leaves on a coloured, this is the basic background page that I painted, and then when it dried I did the stenciling, the mark making over the top, I should say. It's not a stencil, I painted those on, and I still had some of that paint on this canvas, so I went back and that's what I got. I just went over the leaves again, some of them, and then that's what transferred to that page. So that's what all those mark makings did. I mean, there's tons of ways you can make marks on pages. There's just some that I could think of at the time. Now we're going to go ahead and have a look at the pages that used homemade stencils from household objects. And this is the ones with the, I should have kept it out, but you'll know what I mean. This is one where I got that curtain mesh, so it was very subtle with the watercolors, but it's quite nice. And it did transfer on the other side in some respects. And this one's just on a piece of ruled paper. This is one where I did it in the pink or the red. This is coffee dye, I think, or it might have been brown ink, I can't remember. But this one is red ink, distress ink that I used. And then this was what was on the back underneath, because I put a sheet underneath and I put the mesh on top, and then I put this over the top and transferred that image onto it. So that's why that's a lot darker in the watercolor there on some grid paper. This is the cotton weave. It was an open weave, and again it's very delicate. The cotton weave pattern did transfer, and this one has some gold speckle I used sprays, and I must have had some gold in the spray. I used some green and brown gold spray, sorry. So that's what that looks like with spray inks. And it did, I think I turned it over and did the other side, I can't quite remember there. And here's another sheet with, I did greens, I think green and brown, more green. And as I said, it's got some gold, which is quite pretty. That's on art paper that's been coffee dyed. This is when I used the lace curtain, the bottom where it had the flower pattern, and I used inks on this and also on the other side. It's quite pretty, and of course this is the first one, then I redid it with the second page, and then this one here was what was underneath the lace, and I sprayed it with, this one I sprayed with the gold, with some inks and gold, had gold in there, and that's what came out. So that's there. And then this one I used sprayed inks and coffee dye, and this is the Broadway Anglais fabric, and I only had a strip of it, so I did it twice. So that's what that, so it's only on the one side, and I did in the coffee dye, or I might have been brown ink sprays or something or other. I can't really remember now. It doesn't say in my notes here, but anyway, that's different effects. I quite like that as well, and you can see on the back I did it again on the back. And this is some green ink spray and black ink spray on the coffee dye, and this is the felt placemat, you know, with the geometric designs on there. So that was that one, and that was done on some art paper that had been coffee dyed. And these two here are the same, the placemat. So it's very subtle, the pattern on there. And I use sprays, black and brown, and a bit of that red spray, ink sprays on those. And this is what was left because I put these sheets underneath the placemat while I was doing these, and this is what was the impression. So that's what the design of the placemat looked like, if you remember, if you saw the, you've seen the beginning of the video. And this is the one with the doily. You've seen all that before, so I only did one because it was a different type of doily I've never used before. And then this one is the this is the non-stick mat that I used, and I only had a small size, so I redid it again to cover the whole page. And that I did with the inks. I sprayed on the inks and did transfer some of the colour on the back. This is the one where I had that placemat that had all the like a starburst pattern on there, and I absolutely love that one. That's that one. And this was the undersheet, that's why it's a lot darker. And then of course this is the old bubble wrap there, and I used the rollers to roll it on, so it kind of shadowed the image. So that's all the papers. I hope you enjoyed looking through those, and give you some inspiration to go and do some of these for your own journal pages, because they're a lot of fun to just sit down and relax and play around with inks and watercolors to get all these beautiful grungy papers. So thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to check out the next video where I'll be doing this whole process again, repeating all the same steps virtually, but I'll be using water soluble chalk sticks, chalk crayons. So check that one out. That'll be the next video. And for now, I want to wish everybody a happy crafty day, and we will see you in the next video. Bye everyone.